In all of human history, the faith of Elijah and Elisha stands out. Elijah rebuked kings, caused a drought, raised the dead, called down fire and rain, split the Jordan River, 16 miracles in all. Just when you thought you'd seen every miracle, God swept him up and he never tasted death. The mantle was then passed, the portion was then doubled, and Elijah's 16 became Elisha's 32, and these were just ordinary men like us.
What's up? That's right. You guys are my people. These had 9 o'clock was all chipper, and they were like extra loud singing. It was like they were taunting me from behind. But you guys, you wanted to sleep in this morning. I knew I'd like this service. Oh, man. Whoever came up with this time change thing, I want to go back in history and punch that guy in the face. Yeah, I'm tired, man. I guess I'm not supposed to say that as a pastor, but, I have feelings too. Man. So this is a new experience, just to be honest with you. It is the first time I've ever preached on this Sunday. It's a lot harder. I'm not a morning person. I know a lot of you guys get up at like 2 in the morning to drive to DC and stuff. Man, I'm useless till like 9 or 10 o'clock. Like my brain just doesn't work. I'll be awake before then, but my brain, you want me to say something intelligent. Right now it's about right. And I just can't. I can't. And then today with the lost hour of sleep, and then Charlotte, our baby who sleeps awesome, decided she wanted to wake up in the middle of the night last night. So I ended up having a child in my bed. So hopefully this is great. If it is, you can know God did it, because look, things you want to know, not just me complaining. The Ukraine offering last week. First of all, I want you guys to know kind of the background on it. Last week was the first week of the month, right? And that can be a bit intimidating when we talk about giving away, because you may not know this, but the first week of the month is usually the best giving Sunday of the month. And so when we were like, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. This is how good God is. Logan made a contact, and we did a little bit of research on it. And then I shot a text to our finance director. I said, hey, can we pull this off? And she goes, sure, God math always works. That was her answer. And so she says that all the time. And so I was like, all right, cool. I didn't realize till like Sunday morning that it was the first Sunday of the month. And like, you got to understand, most of you, a large chunk of you guys decide that you want to give on the first Sunday of the month, which is awesome, right? It's really cool. But then I realized we were giving away the most important Sunday of the month. And that made me nervous. But let me tell you how good God is and how good you are at following what he says. We gave away $20,600. Yeah, that's awesome. It's our other campuses did their giving in just a little bit different way. And so what I want you guys to know is you're leading the way. We make up almost half of our total donation. You guys are leading the way, and your faithfulness is awesome. And we hope to have that money making a difference on the ground in Ukraine and in Moldova as soon as we can. So that's a really, really cool deal. Thank you guys for being faithful, and thank you for being generous. It was a really, really neat thing. So, and I'm sorry that I'm not like way more cheerleader-ish. Like, I really wish that you guys were like standing and but like we just did our job, right? And I don't know, we just did our job. It's amazing how generous you guys are, and it's amazing that God gives us the opportunity. But I think we also, in perspective, we showed up for work last weekend, and we intend to continue doing that. All right, does that work? Everybody good? It's an awkward way to talk about that, but I think it's just true. It's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be faithful, and we're supposed to show up for the widow and the orphan. And in Ukraine especially, it's a real thing. So thank you guys so much. Elisha, We're talking about Elisha still. We are coming up on the end of this run. Next week's the last sermon in this series. But I want to kind of do a quick review to get where we've been to where we are, because I know you probably at this point you've heard it like 7 times. But what I want to do that because I think it's important that we understand the context, that we understand the story, that we understand the Bible. And I think a lot of times we can get so preoccupied with jumping around and preoccupied with saying things that we just don't give the whole story, right? So I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of the whole story again, and you'll just have to forgive me if you've heard it 7 times. So we started with Elijah, right? And Elijah was the prophet of the Lord for the king of the kingdom of Israel. So what happens is the nation of Israel ends up getting split into 2 kingdoms. You have the kingdom of Judah, the kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of Judah had some good kings that kind of went okay. The kingdom of Israel had mostly bad ones. And Elijah shows up on the scene when they had an especially bad one. His name was Ahab. And Ahab he just did everything wrong. They ended up worshiping in the temples of Baal rather than the temple of God. And so they've turned their back on God. They've gotten into all these different crazy things. And then on top of that, Ahab's wife, Jezebel, is like kind of leading the charge religiously. And she's leading the charge in the wrong direction. She is like the main lady for Baal, right? And so it's this whole problem. And Elijah comes on the scene and he says to Ahab, hey, it's not going to rain until I say it's going to rain. God told me to tell you that. And super awkward conversation, but it ends up not raining. And so then they end up in this standoff between Elijah, the prophet of Yahweh, of God, right? And the prophets of Baal. And it's basically who's God's going to show up? Which God's real? And in that standoff, our God shows himself by consuming an offering, a burnt offering, through fire from heaven. But then the prophets of Baal, nothing happens. And then Elijah ends up killing all the prophets of Baal. Ancient story. You know, you got to judge ancient stories by ancient context, not by modern context. So he ends up killing all the prophets of Baal. And then Jezebel's really mad. Like Jezebel's super mad at Elijah and says, I'm going to kill you. And Elijah, coming off of this moment where he stood for God, where he's proven God, where he's been a huge vessel for the work of God, now all of a sudden he's terrified and he's borderline suicidal. He runs off into the wilderness. God ends up meeting with Elijah. He talks to Elijah and he says, hey, I got this. I have a guy who's going to be your protege. I set him up. You're going to go anoint him. I got a couple kings that I want you to anoint. And I've saved 6,000 people who haven't bowed to the idols. And so Elijah goes from like this huge moment to this super low moment to realizing he's not all alone, because he was super low because he thought he was all alone. He thought he was the only one fighting for God. And so he ends up going and anointing this guy Elisha to be the prophet next. And Elisha was a man of means, but he turns his back on everything he has, and he goes and he follows Elijah. He follows God's plan. And Elisha becomes the next prophet for the kings of Israel. And so Elisha, we talked about, he starts to gain stature in the eyes of the kings. At first, they didn't know who he was, and then they begin to realize that he is the prophet, because he comes to the king at one point, and they got out into the wilderness. They don't have any water. They're about to die of thirst, and the king's like, talk to God. What are we supposed to do here? And Elisha says, dig a bunch of ditches in this valley, and in the morning God will put water in them. Now, this is a huge moment because they're dying of thirst, right? And so if they exert themselves more, they're just going to die of thirst faster. And so they have to make a choice. They decide to dig the ditches, the water fills, and the army survives. And that's Elisha. That's Elisha's doing through God, right? Or God's doing through Elisha. That's God's doing through Elisha. And so Elisha then goes on. He's got all these, there's a bunch of different miracles in the book, and we've only cherry-picked a few. But last week, Logan spoke about Naaman, a powerful general from another nation who Elisha is asked to heal. And so we end up here in 2 Kings chapter 6. And we're going to go from verse 8 to like verse 23. So this is 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 8. Now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, I will set up a camp in such and such a place. The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place because the Arameans are going down there. So the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and time again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, tell me which of us is on the side of the king of Israel. None of us, my lord, the king, said one of his officers, but Elisha, the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Go find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. The report came back, he is in Dothan. Then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early in the morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh no, my lord, what shall we do? He asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. Then the Lord opened his servant's eyes, and he looked, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. As the enemy came down toward him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, strike this enemy with blindness. So he struck them with blindness, as Elisha had asked. Elisha told them, this is not the road, this is not the city. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man you are looking for. And he led them to Samaria. Samaria is the capital of the kingdom of Israel. Formerly, it would have been Jerusalem, but in the split, Jerusalem is part of Judah. And so Samaria is the capital of the kingdom of Israel. So the king lives there. After they entered the city, Elisha said, Lord, I just read Jord. All right. Lord, open the eyes of these men so that they can see. Then the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked, and there they were inside Samaria. The king of Israel saw them. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, what shall I do? Shall I kill them? Do not kill them, he answered. Would you kill those you have captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them so that they may eat and drink, and then go back to their master. So he prepared a great feast for them. After they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away. So they returned to their master, and the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. So, in recap, real quick, right? This is how it goes down. Elisha is warning the king how to not get jumped. Like that's what, essentially back in those times, what would have happened is these kings would have gone on, they would have had war seasons. So when the weather's good and everything else, they would have gone to war. And essentially what this means is they go to neighboring countries and they pillage and they take resources. And so that's what Aram's doing. They're sending bands of raiders into the Israelite territory to take stuff. And so that's kind of what's happening. The king of Israel is trying to stop that. And every time he goes out, they set a trap for him. And every time they set a trap for him, Elisha says, hey, watch out. They set a trap for you. And so then this keeps happening, right? And the king of Aram is freaked out. Like, he's like, what is going on? How do they know what we're doing every time? Every time. And they're like, well, Elisha knows what you say even in your bedroom. Super weird. Right? Like I was at Josh, my brother, and Alexa, his wife. They're having a baby soon, so they had a baby shower yesterday. And I was standing in the kitchen, and they have this camera in the kitchen. It's like a security thing, but also grandma lives with them, and so it's in case something were to happen to her, they'd know. And so they have the camera, and I never noticed this. I've been there dozens of times, but the camera follows you around. So I'm in this baby shower, and this camera's following me, and I look at Josh, I'm like, why is it following me? Like, it's just turning every time I walk by. He's like, it just does that. I'm like, dude, this is, okay. Super weird, right? Like, but that's how the king felt then. Imagine feeling that way when there aren't cameras on everybody's doorbell, right? Imagine feeling that way when you didn't know that Google was listening on your phone all the time. Anybody else just like get ads about something they just talked about like 2 seconds ago? Yeah, creepy. So that's how this guy felt. And so they surround the town that Elisha's in. And you know, more likely than not, they're surrounding the town that Elisha's in so that they can capture him and the king can take him back to his place and get him to do whatever magic he's doing so that he can be the one that he knows what everybody else is doing. Does this make sense? Because at that time, he wouldn't have put two and two together that Elisha is God's servant and God's giving him that information. He would have thought somehow he's some diviner, some kind of magician, some kind of something else. And so they're probably trying to capture him. And the servant's freaking out because, I mean, you would be if there's a bunch of soldiers surrounding your house, right? And every time I read Elisha, I just hear him in this like really monotone voice, like, don't be scared. Don't be scared. What? You imagine being the servant in that moment? Like, what do you, okay, hold on. First of all, they're coming to capture you. What does that mean for me? Are they going to kill me? Are they going to take me with you? You don't be scared. Like, what's wrong with you? You're a crazy person. Don't be scared. And then Elisha just prays, open his eyes. Lord, open his eyes. And all around, there's chariots and horses of fire, right? And then the craziest part of the story to me is Elisha. First of all, these soldiers are blinded, and they follow him. They all of a sudden go blind, and then they just follow a voice to another town. Crazy. They end up in the other town, and everything kind of works out. So what does it mean for us today? What are we supposed to take from that? Because I venture to guess that none of you guys have prayed and then seen chariots of fire in the hills. Yeah, I don't see any hands raised. So, what? The first thing that we can kind of pull from this story, happens early on. It's the king. The king is the king. This king, he's not any good. Keep in mind what I had said. Most of the kings of the kingdom of Israel they'd been terrible. Like, they'd taken them down the wrong way. Everything you can do wrong, these guys had done wrong. Like, and you think about it in today's perspective, right? You're like, okay, like, that's awesome. I'm not a pagan. Like, okay, these guys, we see the paganism and we say, oh, like, well, I believe in God. But like it's the 21st century. These things have to be contextualized a little bit differently. These guys, the king that is following a fertility god, right? If you're following a fertility god, like really what that comes down to is there's all kinds of crazy sex rituals. And like in today's world, we don't call that paganism. We just call it Pornhub, right? And these kings, they're supposed to go out. They're supposed to go out with their armies. They're supposed to lead their armies, right? And a lot of them don't do that either, right? And you're like, well, I don't do that, right? Okay, you don't do that, but like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. You're supposed to lead. You're supposed to lead your family. Are you doing that? Like, we see these people, and it's really easy because of the disconnect to not relate. But at the end of the day, like we can be a lot like these bad kings. We can have some of the same things going on. The difference is in our context, they just seem far more normal than they do when we read the Bible. But like, that's kind of the problem. Is our context has sanitized evil out of the picture. Our context has sanitized sin out of the picture. And so this guy, this king, he's not a great king, and he's doing a lot of stuff that he's not supposed to do. He's somebody who he doesn't even recognize God in the same way. Like this guy, like there's the king of Israel is supposed to be someone who says there's one true God and I will follow him and no one else. Like we're supposed to say there's one true God and I will not elevate anything or anyone to that level, right? But he doesn't do that. Sure, he believes in Yahweh, he believes in God, he believes in the God of Israel, but he also believes in other gods. He also has bowed to other things. Like what things in your life do you bow to? What things in your life have been elevated to the level of worship. What controls your life more than the Word of God? But the thing we can learn from this story is that it doesn't matter so much what I've done as it matters who I am. God, even though this king was not following God in the ways he should have been, God still reached out and saved him. God still reached out and took care of him. God still reached out and took care of his people. Doesn't matter what I've done, it matters. It's more important. Who I am is more important than what I've done. I could just read that on my notes. Anyway, who I am is more important than what I've done. Who I am is more important than what I've done. We believe that Jesus died on the cross for everybody. We believe that Jesus paid the price for sin for everybody. And it's called, Jesus is the atonement that Jesus paid on. There's two different ways of looking at this inside the church. There's universal atonement, limited atonement. Universal atonement means Jesus died for everybody. All we have to do is choose him. And limited atonement is a whole nother theological place where some people believe that Jesus only died for the elect because God foreknew, and it's this whole thing, and it's a little bit of a word game, and anyway. So we believe that Jesus died for everybody, and all we have to do is choose him. So Jesus has already paid the price for my sins. Jesus has already done these things for me. God has already reached out to me and said it's okay. And then all along the way in my life, God will continue reaching out to me and saying, I'm with you. I'm here for you. I want to help you. I want to lead you. I want you to follow me. And he'll chase you and he'll do that. And God pursues you. So he cares more that you are his child. He cares more that he created you. He cares more about those things than anything that you've done wrong. He also wants you to stop doing those things because he wants you to live in his fullness. He wants you to live in with his peace, with his holiness, right? But first and foremost, he cares who you are more than he cares what you've done. The next thing that happens here is a little bit later. You know, you have they show up and they've surrounded the town and the servant thinks they're just going to fall apart. He thinks that the people are going to come in, they're going to take them, and they're just going to, it's all over. It was a nice run. And Elisha says, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. The next thing that we can learn from Elisha in this is whose I am is more important than who I am. The fact that I belong to God means that I don't go anywhere alone. The fact that I belong to God means that I always have a partner in life. The fact that I belong to God means that I always have him providing. I always have his provision. I always have access to his peace. I always have access to his hope. I always have access to those things through the Holy Spirit, right? And Elisha is God's man, right? Elisha belongs to God. Elisha has given up everything to do what God asked him to do, right? And so Elisha belongs to God, and the fact that he belongs to God means that he's not alone. He's not alone. There are horses and chariots all around. He has protection. God is looking out for him. So growing up, I grew up, my dad was like my hero, like growing up, I don't know. So my dad's a pastor and as well, and he's my hero growing up. But when I was in fourth grade, they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be like Reggie White. If anybody watches NFL, Reggie White was probably the greatest defensive lineman to breathe ever. But he was also a pastor. That's what I wanted to do. I want to play in the NFL and be a pastor, right? Dumb idea. I'm a little short, a little slow, a little uncoordinated, not too big for that position, but from a weight standpoint, but the ratios aren't right. I'm supposed to be about 5 inches taller and weigh the same. The That's what I wanted to be. So I got one and not the other. And growing up, I always watched him. I was always unpacking what he was doing. And somewhere along the line, I got in this place where, like, I've always just believed that God's going to provide. And they say that the way that you view your father will be similar to the way that you view God. And all throughout my life, like, my dad's always taken care of me. Like, even when he probably shouldn't have. Like, I dropped so many classes in college. He should have stopped paying for stuff. It was bad. Like, I was wasting money left and right. Like, I was an idiot in college. And he just kept, and then when I messed up and I had to come home, he was like, hey, door's open. There's a bed. Like, he just took care of me. I was always provided for. And so I've gotten to this place as an adult where, like, man, sometimes I'll jump before I look because I just believe that God's going to take care of it. I just believe, like I belong to God, and I believe that he will take care of it. You know, I believe that my daddy owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and there's nothing we can't do. Because whose I am matters far more than who I am, and I belong to him. He's going to take care of it. So that, we'll keep moving, sorry. We'll count that to the lost hour of sleep. Y'all, I'll just forget it happened. The very next verse. So 16, we just went over. Don't be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Verse 17. Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. The last thing, when you feel surrounded, just look up. Just look up. I know that that's a cheesy pastor line. I know you've probably sat through sermons where people have said things like that. It doesn't make it any less true. It doesn't make it any less true. When we get into these jams, when we get into these places, when we need God the most, he always shows up. The question is, are your eyes open or not? Oftentimes, God will show up in a way that we're not looking for and we miss it. Or God will do something that we didn't expect him to do, and we don't even understand that God did that until the backside of it. We see, like, when our faith is small and our eyes are closed and we believe that we're alone, we can get into a place where we begin to believe that lie, and all we need to do is look up and ask, God, where are you? Help me see what you're doing here. But it can be hard to get to that place. And where we're at right now in the world, it can be hard to figure that out. I'm sure some of you are going over your personal finances and going, how high is gas going to go? You remember when it was like $3 a gallon and we were complaining about that? Some of you are looking at the world and you're going, let's just run down the list. Gas is super high. I paid $5 a gallon yesterday. Is Russia going to nuke Ukraine? How is this going to affect the whole world economy? Are we going to be looking at World War III? What's going to happen? How's this all going to go? How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to keep the lights on? Right? Like, these have to, maybe you're one of the people that you're not worried about it. God bless you. That's amazing. And when COVID hit, I did this thing. COVID happened, and I went, like, I don't know, maybe I'm probably not the only one because the world went crazy for a minute. Like, I lived on my phone. Like Like I would need to know what the news was, so I'd check the news. And then I would need to know what the stats were, and so I'd check that. And then I'd need to know I'd need to know what everybody's saying about it, so I'd be on social media. And like it was just this thing. Like I had a list that I went down every time I picked up my phone, and I'm picking up my phone way too much because there's nothing to do. And I'm just doing this thing, and I'm going down into the rabbit hole, man. And you're just like, it's the deep dive, and you're just like, what is gonna happen? How is the world gonna deal with it? How long is the world gonna stay closed? But then like, how do you open safely? But then like it's just, the whole thing is just a mess. There's so much stuff, and I was just like, I lived on my phone. And then like you had the protests that happened, and that was all heartbreaking because it's like, man, we still got a lot to work on. But then it's like also like, hey, can we stop fighting on social media like that? Like you'd be like just a million things in the comments, and it's like none of you would say that to each other's faces if you saw one another. Like, what is going on? And so like I'm sitting here, and it's like, dang, man, like we can't have church, but also half the church hates the other half of the church, and like what? And then the news and and I lived in that place, and I lived in that place, and I lived in that place. And I started catching myself doing it again in the last couple of weeks. Like, what's going to happen? What's going to, like live updates on what's going on in Eastern Europe, and just like, like getting angry at the gas pump every time you see it. And how do you deal? And I've been like kind of working through all of that because I don't want to end up where I was in COVID, because that got really dark really fast. But also like I don't want to be unconcerned or uninformed because I don't want to be dumb, right? And I'm hoping you guys are tracking with me and you're feeling some of the same things, right? And so that's kind of where I've been at the last few weeks. And something came to mind last service that was kind of helpful. Anybody ever heard of the Jocko podcast or Jocko Willink? Retired Navy SEAL. He has a podcast, and he's like you. When he communicates, he's like, ugh. He's like the let's go, like the manly man guy. He's like a former Navy SEAL, like a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Like, he can kill you with his pinky toe, probably. And that's just like, and he's that intense. Like, this man has an Instagram, and the only posts on his Instagram are a picture of his watch when he wakes up, which is always 4:30, and a picture of the floor after he works out, which is always a puddle. And like, that's it. Like, that's just, that explains him, right? So I started listening to his podcast a few years back. And he has these two things he goes back to all the time. One of them is discipline equals freedom. So this principle that he does is, if you are disciplined, then you can be free. But if you're not disciplined, your bad habits will take over your life. Pretty cool idea. Really like it. And then he's got one other one, and it's just good. He actually got a bar for his workout room that just says good on it. And basically, it's this motto that he came up with while he was deployed. And when things go wrong, the answer is just good. So like, car breaks down. Good. I have an opportunity to learn how to fix my car. Something goes wrong somewhere else. Good. I can grow from that. Good. Anytime you meet a problem, you just say good, because I have something to overcome. I can learn, I can grow, I can become better, right? And that's just his whole approach to life. And like, I think like when it all comes down to this, when you take where we're at in our world, and then you take with this message and you shove them together, and like where I've landed on where we're at right now is good. I'm not happy about what's happening, but we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to show real faith. We have an opportunity to experience the peace of God. We have an opportunity to lead through tragedy. We have an opportunity to lead through hard times. We have an opportunity to see God prove himself over and over and over again. And we have an opportunity to communicate that to those around us, because in these hard times, God moves and things change and it gets better. And we can become better witnesses. We can give more testimonies. We can be better spokespeople for Jesus. Because we know that who I am matters more than what I've done. So I've been freed. I've been claimed. I've been taken care of. I've been cleaned. I've been made new. But we also know that because we belong to God, we will be provided for. It may not be how we want it, may not be what we want, but God says in the New Testament, in Matthew, Jesus says that look at the lilies in the field. I clothe them beautifully. I'll take care of you. Look at the sparrows. They don't save anything, but they still eat. Because I belong to God, I will never lack for provision. And when I'm starting to feel discouraged and I can't see where he's moving, all I have to do is look up and pray, Lord, open my eyes. Let me see what you're doing. Let me understand. I don't know how long all this is going to last. It could be momentary. But what I do know is in times like these, we lead. In times like these, we lead our communities in generosity and in service and just in good leadership and in being people who have the answers because we have the God. In times like these, we lead people to Jesus because in times like these, people know they need something else and we have their answer. In times like these, we take ground because God moves in darkness when everyone else hides. The biggest question is, will you have the audacity and the faith to look up and believe that your daddy owns the cattle on 1,000 hills and he'll take care of you? Can I pray with you? God, first of all, we just thank you for being good and for caring about people like us. Lord, I pray that we leave here knowing that you care for us, knowing that you'll take care of us. Lord, I pray that you would take the offering from last week and that you would let it be more powerful than it ever should be in this world. Lord, that with every bottle of water or piece of bread that's handed out in your name, that it would be life-changing, that it would be soul-nourishing, that it would be something that matters to people who are desperately in need. And Lord, I pray that if there are more opportunities to be of assistance, that we could figure out how to do that. God, I just pray that as we move forward into weird times, Lord, that you be more present than ever. And that, Lord, that we'd see people coming to know you, that we'd see lives changed, that we would see souls saved simply because we have faith in darkness. Lord, let us lead. Let us be your people. Let us be sold out. Let us not be afraid. Let times like these be times when you shine, and you shine brightest because we testify in your name. Amen.